people listening, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Fam. My pronouns are they, them. And from Hackney, born and raised. I'm in my 30s, if that matters for anybody. And just been working, I guess I've been working online for, I don't know how many years now, nearly coming up to 10 years or so. My background is in marketing and videography. And yeah, and I guess I'm heavily connected to the queer community, and more recently, like with the South Asian queer community.
Obviously, I've seen from your socials how much connected with that specific community you are, but how has your journey been? Because obviously you've just said now it's been quite a recent thing. So how were you able to actually find that community and become like such a key part of it?
I guess I was more so in the Soho queer scene, just like coming out and being okay and comfortable with myself. And I guess finding people of color, or finding even politically identifying like people in the gay and lesbian scene wasn't really that much back when I was out and about in Soho. But then I met somebody that was Bengali, and then they introduced me to a whole bunch of like other creatives that were Bengali, and then I met my mate Rahul, who we both co-founded Odbhut Bangla together.
So tell us a bit about that organization. Like, what does it stand for? What does it provide? Any services? Is it just a place for people to come together? Like, what's the key message behind it?
Well, when we came up with the idea, it's just because we always had so much banter, and not even just me and him, but like even with just the Bengalis that we were hanging out with, actually they're quite queer, you know, and I guess they weren't so exposed to like such queer identities like me and my friend. And then just the banter was just like, well, why don't we just create something where queer Bengalis are represented? Quite often in the South Asian queer community, or just even South Asian communities, like the Bengali voice, and I'm just going to speak from the Bengali perspective, is like I find that the Bengali voice is usually like quite erased, or like I found it quite difficult to identify with Desi, the term Desi. And so, yeah, just like to create a platform where other queer Bengalis can feel seen and validated, and just like to have a space where we can just have a collection of awesome queer Bengalis. I mean, you don't have to be doing anything like huge or major to be recognized.
I really feel that. I talk, because I'm Bengali as well, and I talk all the time on the show, like specifically about that thing. Obviously, like yours is in the context of kind of like, you know, of queerness, but I do speak a lot about how the Bengali voice is erased, silenced, forgotten a lot, like, and it is a very, very political thing.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, like we're speaking from being Bengali, right? But there are like I have Sri Lankan friends who are Tamils, friends who are Gujarati, and it's like, okay, is this Desi conversation that you're having? Do we have to speak Hindi? And it's like, and there has been an occasion where somebody who was like leading a conversation and was like, well, if you don't understand Hindi, then you might as well just leave. I'm just like, what is that about? It's elitist South Asian sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's sick. I think it's sick that there's something specifically to speak, because I mean, like, identity has so many like layers, right? And like you can, on one layer, yeah, you can say you are Desi queer people, but then also your experience will be different from, say, an Indian queer person, right? Because you are specifically Bengali as well. So
yeah, and
the fact that sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and it would differ if you're from Kolkata.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of people from Kolkata would identify with the Indian identity. Yeah. So it's like 100. It is very conflicting. It's very conflicting. Yeah.
No, but it's interesting though that you guys have made an organization to serve that, right? To serve that, like to kind of try to answer that conflict in some ways.
Like to have a face for it. Yeah. Have a face for it. It's not like we're funded or anything. So like the last event that I just did, I just thought it's been 2 years, you know, like COVID and stuff. And you know, my majority of my friends, well, a lot of my friends based in Bangladesh, you know, they're having struggles with being like openly queer and whatever, but they're still managing to have events. There is the elite class. There is the elite class in Bangladesh. Don't get me wrong. It's not as easy.
I know.
Yeah, right. It's not as easy, but it's also happening. Like it's still happening in Bangladesh. They are able to have their events because I guess, I don't know, that by the right people or whatever. But yeah, in London, space, accessibility, you know,
all plays a part.
Yeah.
Do you feel like if what you're doing now had been available to you, say 20, 15 years ago, would your life have maybe been a bit easier, or you would have been able to like find your people earlier, sort of thing?
Well, it's funny you say that, because my first experience was my older sister actually took me to Club Kali, and I think I was like 16. So there were underage stuff going on there, but she just did it just to expose me to, look, there's a whole bunch of people that are like you.
Yeah,
and I didn't see that in Soho, but you know, I saw it at specific nights. So there were specific nights, and there have been specific nights, but what I would say that has changed accessibility is social media.
Yeah.
Like and also and that has just pushed forward conversations at school, at homes, like even my nephews, the way they speak to my sister about, like, you know, conversations at school about LGBT. Well, I mean, I don't know if they use LGBTQI acronyms, but they have like the LGBT standard conversations in assemblies and what's bullying and whatnot, but they're still not talking about gender. So I guess, yeah, that's
when Carlos was saying that about you guys, how you think it would have impacted you, I think really what he was pointing to was a question about legacy, right? But then the way you answered a question about lineage as well, which is, I think, interesting. Also relates back to what you were saying about the kind of queer scene in Bangladesh, and the fact that and the erasure of voices. And someone would look at something like your organization and think, oh my God, it's so novel and it's so new. And maybe it is novel in the way that you guys are, I mean, you're loud and proud about it, right? But what would you say, like, would you say there are kind of certain political movements or organization, because I mean, queer Bengalis have been here, right? So really there is a legacy that's created from your movement, but your movement is also part of a larger lineage of queer Bengali liberation movements. Would you say there is anything that might have like influenced or something that was like heavily impacted your guys's like politics or your activism or just community even?
You know what, this is, I mean, yeah, I think I did skirt around your question there, Carlos. But
no, I meant to say, sorry, I didn't mean to be like, oh, you answered the question wrong. I mean, like, it was interesting. It's really interesting when we think about, you know, things like legacy and lineage, because they're two sides of the same coin, really, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I guess personally, what I would say that changed my life massively was actually understanding my internalized racism, and then understanding my anti-Blackness that I grew up with. And then that shifted in an entire politics in my head, because actually, this is really messed up, but actually, well, I mean, we're understanding this now, right? What internalized racism means. Essentially, you're walking around believing that you can benefit from white supremacy. And I actually thought that I could. And then when I realized how deeply screwed white supremacy is and how far deep it was, like in what's happening in Bangladesh and India and Pakistan right now, it changed everything for me in the way that I was having conversations and what types of friendships I was having. I lost so many white gay friends some POC friends as well, some Bengali friends that are still anti-Black till today. And I think that's what like just pushed me forward to find other people like me, or like politically minded and stuff. But yeah, like that wasn't prevalent. These sort of conversations were not prevalent at home, were not prevalent at schools. You just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of go about addressing your own internalized racism once you'd identified that you had those kinds of like stigmas in your mind already, like, you know, just like preconceived perceptions of people based on their race? How did you go about identifying it and then going about the route to reverse those thoughts and kind of like unlearn them?
There was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and then realizing, hang on a minute, if white people can talk about undoing racism, why am I having such difficulty with this? Why am I having such difficulty understanding what cultural appropriation is? Yeah, it was serious interrogation. It was very uncomfortable, but yeah, like I've never been happier in like cultivating like really meaningful relationships and people that are like-minded. Yeah, you don't need to be friends with like people that are like replicas of you, right? But it helps mental health like massively.
If there are people out there, whether they're queer, whether they're POC, Bengali, non-binary, if they are fit into any of those boxes or multiple, whatever, what advice would you maybe have for them in terms of not only coming to terms with their identity, but also celebrating it?
We're not expecting you to have all the answers, by the way, but just
right, yeah,
yeah.
I was just about to say, hang on a minute, I'm not a gatekeeper, yeah. Yeah, it is hard. Look, this journey was not easy. I technically like ran away from home. I got kicked out. I was like ostracized basically. I was outed by my brother, and that was not easy. So like finding ways to accept yourself amongst all of that, like cultural oppression, religious and racial oppression, like at home, the ways to be in school, at work, all of that stuff compounding with your own like identity. I was so conflicted being British and Bengali and Sunni Muslim and gay and now non-binary. I'm just like it's a lot to navigate, and finding friends or a community where you know you can ask these questions and be inquisitive, that really helps like open yourself up and like just I guess can create avenues or like tools, places to go when you're in trouble or when you need like help to figure out what's the next move. What do I do? Do I leave home? How do I leave home in a healthy way? Or do I even need to leave home? Like it's hard.
I think a lot of the conflict comes from the fact that so all of these like facets of your identity that you've just explained, you know, Bengali, British, Muslim, queer, you know, the mainstream expression of certain parts of your identity, namely the fact that being, you know, Bengali Muslim, would posit that identity in opposition to your queerness. And I think probably a lot of the acceptance, you know, will just come from the fact that those things don't have to be in conflict, right? They're not in opposition. You're both of those things or all of those things.
All of those,
yeah, exactly. No, that's
and class has a massive thing to do with it as well, right? Because I was just thinking about this the other day. I was like, wow, like people like legit think that queer people are so cool, like could be however we want to be, and it's like it completely erases the trauma, the massive amounts of traumas that we had to go through to get to being comfortable how we are. It's like there are a lot. I am seeing a lot of cishet people like adopting the way that we are and making it cool or making money off from it, and it makes me upset. Like that's quite hard.
I think especially like there's been an influx of cis heterosexual people adopting this certain androgynous look, which is then like like you're saying, it's seen as, oh, that's cool, like because they're doing it. But then if someone who is actually part of the queer community was to do it or has been doing it for time, that's not celebrated or even accepted in the same way.
I've got a question about, so obviously being Bengali as well, I do understand how kind of some like violently homophobic, you know, the community can be. How have you found, you know, how we just spoke a bit about kind of coming to that place of acceptance and understanding that all facets of your identity are true and in harmony with each other? What kind of, like, could you talk a little bit about that journey, about the kind of sometimes feeling the conflict of, because me personally, I feel like, you know, if I the Bengali community was shunning me so much for a certain part of my identity, it would really make it difficult for me to resonate with that community, you know?
A lot of people are confused as to why is it that I'm still holding on to my Muslim identity. I've had other Bengalis that have completely rejected Islam, or Bengali Hindus that question, you know, how can you believe in a faith that, you know, wants to stone you to death or whatever. I'm just like, dude, that's not the religion, it's the people.
The people,
yeah. And like, and if you know, if we want to get into the legalities of what's happening in Bangladesh, yeah, Section 377 is very much still alive. You are subject to life imprisonment if you're caught being gay. I don't know to what extent does this apply to cis women, but for sure cis men. And it was only recently that they accepted the Hijra identity on passports and on voting. Like,
and it's crazy because it's so entwined with the history of like Bengal and Bangladesh, right? Like it's that thing that I was saying before about lineage. Yeah, like you can erase that kind of the queerness from Bengali identity, but it doesn't change the fact that it's been there and it is there.
Yeah, exactly. And like I've met like Bengalis that, you know, just really have like serious internalized racism as well, just because because they had some serious trauma at home, and it was trauma that was linked to their identity of being Bengali, or Bengali woman. It has to be said, like Bengali guys, like for example, my brothers or cousin brothers and whatever, they were allowed to be out in the world, whereas girls are just kind of shunned. And that's why it's like even having Odbhut, like how do we, like, we're having a conversation about how do we create day events, because like Bengali siblings who are cis women aren't, like,
can't come out at night.
They can't come out at night, and it's just like, what am I doing? Why am I hosting an evening event when actually they can't even access it? It's really conflicting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Just wanted to give a shout out as well. Obviously, you as an individual are involved in so many other different projects as well. Like, so obviously I've got like your little bio here. So it's like featured on multiple murals, the Dhaka Tribune magazine, multiple other magazines, including the Rights Collective, podcast series. Like, you've been doing a lot. Like, so hats off to you for like all that you've been involved in. Do you mind just telling the listeners like where they can find you or the organizations that you're part of, if they think that you could maybe help them in their journey, or they could relate to what you're involved in?
I think the best way to like have a chat with us would be Odbhut Queer Bangla. That's the Instagram handle, Odbhut Queer Bangla. And like I've made a link tree for that as well, actually. So we've got like a document on Google which highlights, you know, imprisonment laws in Bangladesh, 377 conversation, like other organizations like Blast, which is they're incredible in Bangladesh. They're a legal advisory like organization that help men and women. They're working on like reforming the rape law, and they've just had so many incredible conversations and movements in Blast. They're great. There's like other Instagram accounts, if you don't mind. Could I give them a shout out?
Yeah, definitely go for it.
Like Gendered Intelligence is incredible. They're UK based. They gave like trans group and trans awareness posts and stuff. They're really good with that. Alok Menon is an activist. They're an activist and author based in the US. LGBTQ Outside is London LGBTQI plus community shelter for, you know, that I think it's for domestic abuse refuge as well, because there is domestic abuse in in queer relationships as well, right? And yeah, and there's the Queer Muslim Project as well, which is an interesting one for you guys if anyone wanted to check that out as well. Yeah,
great.
and me, I'm just Mercury _done.